Hi, I'm Jacob Van Osel. Today I got to have a little chat with Travis Nolting, the coach of the Greenfield-Central football program. We mostly talked about his goals and expectations for the upcoming season. Here's our talk. Hi, I'm here with Coach Nolting today. We're just going to be talking about the upcoming season. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty well. So to start off, I just want to say, we're coming off a pretty good season last year. Obviously 9-2, had a really big win against Mount Vernon for the first time in, I believe, 6 years. Almost beat New Pal. What are you kind of expecting? Kind of settling into the start of the year this year. What are you hoping for so far?
We lost some good guys at graduation, so obviously, having guys step up and fill those roles of the guys we lost, like Jake Hinton and Reese Hill and Connor Dotson and Kirk Kinnett, and Lane Wadle, all scholarship level players, and then not to mention the other guys we lost as well to graduation. So I think every year you have to try to build up positional depth so that you can reload instead of rebuild, and I think we've done a good job of that because I really like the squad we have this year.
Were you satisfied with how the season went last year?
Well, I'm probably never going to be satisfied, Jake. So in my world, if you're satisfied, you're complacent, and we're not a complacent team. So we still have objectives to complete. We've got to beat New Pal. We want to win the conference. We want to win the sectional, and to do that, we have to play at a high level all the time. And again, never be satisfied.
Would you say the attitude towards Greenfield-Central football has changed in the last few years?
I would say so. In reality, when I got here 6 years ago and we started this process, we were kind of the doormat of the conference. We were the team that everybody scheduled for homecoming and senior night and just beat up on. And with hard work from our players and our coaching staff, we've kind of turned the culture around now, and there's an expectation there, and that's growing. And if you've been around the program for a long time, you can see that. And I think that it's also bleeding off into our feeder programs with our junior high and our youth league as well. So it's a good time to be at Greenfield-Central.
You mentioned, losing those key players, those seniors. How do you work to fill those roles?
Well, I think the biggest thing you have to do is start building positional depth as the season goes. And what I mean by that is giving guys that are going to be guys for you in the future, get them in meaningful reps in games. It might be somebody on a player rotation. For example, if you're on the defensive line, you might play 6 plays, another guy comes in for 3. And that's nothing against the starter. That's just, hey, we're getting another guy ready, but we're also giving you a break so that we expect you to play at 100%. So rotating people around, finding ways for people to get on the field, whether it be special teams or a backup in some role. I think that positional depth building that is big, because you really don't want to have to replace a bunch of guys that have no experience, because that's a little harder.
Obviously, those guys are filling some pretty large shoes. What do you expect out of this year's senior class?
I think this year's senior class has a point to prove, much like last year's senior class. I think the common theme has always been, well, how are you going to win with these guys gone? Well, if you remember, that was what was said when guys like Braden Harrell and Owen Anderson, Andrew Zellers, and that group graduated. And the seniors we had last year said, hey, we got a point to prove. And then I think our group this year is doing the same thing and saying, hey, we're here. We're still here. So, I think that's the motivation factor for this group.
How do you really focus on that player development, taking guys from, a freshman up into like a senior, a very influential player in the program? How do you really develop that?
It's multifaceted. I mean, I think it starts in the weight room. The weight room culture's got to be good. And if you're in a class that's got high energy, like what you are aware of and what you do in there and what you bring to it, you know how much a difference that makes. And how if you go in there and you work hard every day and you do the sets and you do the reps and you don't skip stuff, how that pays off in dividends for you on the field. It makes you a better player. The weight room has been the foundation of everything we've built here, and what we're going to continue to build, and will always be the foundation of that. So I think first and foremost, that's where you have to start. Then obviously the mental aspect of football. We're studying film. We're teaching you how to watch film. We're expecting you to watch film. We're holding you accountable if you don't. As I tell you all the time, when you're watching film and preparing for an opponent, it's like you're studying for a test. And if you don't study for a test, you're probably going to fail. So you have to put forth that effort to prepare yourself mentally as well. So the physical aspect, the mental aspect, and then doing the right thing year round. Football is a year round endeavor for our staff and for our players. I'm monitoring grades year round. I'm pushing you in the weight room year round. If we just said, hey, the November's over, December we're taking off, and we'll see you again in June or whatever, that we wouldn't be where we are. So that continued work is vital to the success of the program.
And with a lot of younger guys or kind of newer starters on the lineup, how are you expecting those guys to perform this year?
Well, we've had one game so far, Beech Grove. Really weren't challenged that much in that game, but I think for the most part, a lot of our guys that we had questions about have stepped up. We've got another game tomorrow night against Greensburg, and then week 3 against Mount Vernon. So the objective is just to try to make yourself a little better every day. I do like who we have. I like, especially on our offensive line, we got a lot of young guys. There's no seniors currently starting up there, so all those guys are going to be back again next year too. So that's going to provide a lot of help in a lot of ways. So getting those game experiences and things like that, as I mentioned earlier, is big. But I think we're expecting a lot out of those guys.
And I know you expect a lot out of those guys, rightfully so. How do you focus on keeping them motivated and working hard year round?
Well, and I tell our offensive line this all the time. They're the most underappreciated position group in football, right? They don't get any of the glory, but they have to do all the work. It's the one position group in football that relies on no other position group to be good, but everybody relies on them to be good. Because if we don't have a solid offensive and defensive line, we're not going to be successful. And it's a little easier to get a little notoriety in defense because you can get sacks and tackles for loss, and people see that and they see those statistics. But when you're an O-lineman and you got to grind and your name's not in the paper every week, it's tough. It's a pride thing, and I think our guys have done a pretty good job of taking pride in that. Now, they'll always hear it from me. I don't care who we have running the ball back there, throwing a pass. If we don't have it done up front, we're not going to be very good. So they're the most important position group we have on the team.
As a team, kind of as a whole, what are your expectations going into this season?
Well, I think the biggest thing is continuing to have a bunch of firsts. And one of the firsts this year, if we can accomplish it, to have a winning season again, it will be the first time in school history that we've had 4 consecutive winning seasons. And I think that's a big, big thing. And I think if we can accomplish that, that'll take the program another step as well. And then obviously competing in our conference at a high level and competing in the sectionals. I mean, the last couple of years we've been really close, but we're still climbing the mountain. We still haven't been able to plant the flag yet. So we're going to continue to work until we do.
And how have those goals changed from obviously when you first started here until now?
And I think you have to look at too, like when the first couple of years we were here, the goals were teach the team how to compete. Because when I inherited the program, they had just come off an 0-10 season. I don't know if the program probably was maybe it might have been at the lowest point it ever had been. So we had 49 players. I mean, your older brother was part of that group that helped us lay that foundation, and went through that process and went through those tough years of getting us back to competitive. And I have the utmost respect for those guys. And the one thing that I told them all along was, you guys are going to be remembered for starting this, for building the foundation of what we're building. So I think the focus back then was teach the team how to compete. And once we taught you how to compete and fight in games, then it starts shifting into winning. And then once you start shifting into winning and the expectations there and you expect to win, then you got to win the big ones, right? The big games. You got to start winning the New Pal games, the Mount Vernon games, the Delta games, the Pendleton Heights games. And if you are doing that and you have that expectation, then you have a little bit more mental toughness. So the adversity of losing, in a situation where somebody scores a touchdown on you, you're not down. You're motivated. You come back and fight back. Pendleton Heights game last year is a great example of that. We were down in that game, and you guys fought back, and we won. So, I think that's how it's changed. Is you've got to shift your focus from teaching them to compete, teach them to win, expecting to win, and then further developing it after that.
You mentioned New Pal, Mount Vernon, some other teams. How do you work to kind of prepare yourself and the team and the other coaching staff the week of one of those big games?
Well, it's like I've told you guys a bunch of times, the question that you have to ask yourself every day when you leave the weight room or you leave the practice field or you leave the coach's office is, have I worked hard enough to beat New Pal this week? We haven't beat them yet in my tenure here. We're going to strive to compete and do that and work as hard as we can until we accomplish the goal. It's a relentless pursuit. And that's how you have to approach it, and that's how you have to approach life. You have to go in there and just battle all the time. So I think that's the biggest thing that you have to ask yourself is, have I worked hard enough to beat whoever you're trying to beat that week?
And what would you say you kind of have, but what's the mindset going into that week? How do you handle going against a team that you know could be one of those like problem teams? You know?
Well, I think what you have to do is you have to prepare every week like you're playing one of those problem teams. It doesn't matter how good or how bad a team is, every week has to be focused and sharp and crisp, and you have to go in every week like you're playing for a sectional championship. That's how your team has to address things and approach things, and it's how we as a coaching staff do. I know that I can tell you, we the last 2 weeks we have not skimped off on scouting. We are scouting Beech Grove. We are scouting Greensburg. We are practicing and we're preparing like it's a New Pal week or a Mount Vernon week or any other week for that matter.
Mm-hmm. You already mentioned, the team's going for potentially the first 4 consecutive winning seasons in a row. What are some of the other big goals this year as of like a sectional championship, stuff like that?
Sure. I think you got to win the rival games. I mean, I think, competing to beat Mount Vernon is a big one. That's always a goal. Obviously, New Pal being county schools as well is competing to beat them. And then Pendleton Heights in the recent years has really grown into a really big rival game for us too, because it's they got kind of the best of us for a couple years, and we've kind of gotten the best of them for the last couple years. But it's usually a dogfight. It's usually a really highly competitive game. I think those big games, like I talked about winning the big game, those are goals. Obviously, you winning the conference, winning the sectional, competing for far into the tournament, the ultimate goal being a state champion. I think those are the things that you're striving for all the time. But, as far as our program, like I said, the 4th consecutive winning season will be huge for us.
Well, thank you, Coach. That's all we have for you today. Thank you for doing this, and
Yep.
Good luck this season.
Yep, thank you.